So this event is starting a little different than most because it is actually a celebration event. Mildred Chua-Ulger retired after 34 years at the Metropolitan Transit Administration, and she's had so many jobs and positions there that it's hard for me to keep track. So I will let Mildred start off by how did you get to retirement? Why don't we usually say, how did you get here? But now we can say, how did you get to retirement?
Oh my goodness. So thank you so much for having me and to talk about this and asset management in particular. But how did I get to retirement? Well, 34 years of service with New York Metropolitan Transportation Authority. I held many positions over there, primarily in one of the operating agencies, which is Bridges and Tunnels, also known as Triborough Bridge and Tunnel Authorities. It's the largest toll collection agency in the United States in terms of revenue. So it was really a very exciting career. I'm very happy to explore new opportunities. After really serving the MTA with, so much, there was so much opportunity there, and I really enjoyed my career there. Just looking to do something else, since I'm not quite that old yet to just park
No, you
myself
certainly
somewhere
don't look
and sit in a rocking chair somewhere. So I'd like to contribute more, and the field of asset management is where I have developed a really strong passion for, and that's why I am here having this nice conversation with you, Mike.
But thank you. So I know you were the CFO there for Tunnel and Bridges. And then where did you move to after that?
Then I went to corporate headquarters, MTA, and I became.
You're getting job offers already.
Yes, I became the director and program executive for the enterprise asset management program there. But within 3 months, I was pulled in to lead the organizational transformation, very famous. It was written all over the place, like Wall Street Journal and everything. It was a historic mandated transformation. I led the planning efforts for that, and then went on to become head of program delivery for the transformation until I retired. So a very fast and furious 3 years, I would say.
So what were the 2 jobs that you had at the same time there?
It's head of program delivery and transformation, and program executive for the enterprise asset management program. So
Okay.
blending in, so the whole point there is to actually blend in asset management into the transformation, into the organizational transformation.
So basically ISO 55000 transforms your organization. So your asset management team better be aligned with your transformation team because that's what's driving it, right?
Yes, yes, without being overt about it. I mean, I must say that I think there's a tendency to actually get intimidated when you hear ISO standards or management systems or systems approaches. I think people tend to shy away from it, and the buy-in is not easy, right? So we try to go about it in a way that's much more indirect, but still it is the principles of asset management. It is ISO 55000. We just call them best practices. I mean, I think that's
What I understand, from what I understand, you personally were looking at the ISO 55000 playbook,
right.
but then you were saying we're going to implement best practices.
Right. Correct. Because that's really what they are. And I think there is, and I presented on the transformation plan in several forums. There's a slide that I always put up, and it just shows you sort of in a nutshell what the transformation plan is and how it's aligned to asset management principles.
Okay, well, while Nick is getting that ready,
okay.
To fire up, can you tell us what did you start with? Not that you went, top to bottom through ISO 55000. What in your situation was appropriate for you to start with?
It was about the life cycle management approach in general, whether it's whether it's in maintenance, whether it's in finance, right, whether it's in human resources, it's how do we look at all of our assets, whatever they are, people assets, financial assets, physical assets, how do we manage them throughout their life cycle in a way that is effective and efficient, that brings value to the organization. So if you are looking at human resources, I'm going to stay away from physical assets, right? Because that's pretty straightforward. But in human resources, you have a hire to retire process, right? That involves the entire organization and not just human resources. And if you look at the steps throughout the hire to retire process, from the time you're soliciting a person to come join you, to work for you operate and maintain them. So they provide services for you. You maintain them by providing training, by giving them all the support that they need to build up their capabilities. And then they separate, right? At whatever form they separate. But that process is no different than acquiring an asset, a new bridge, a new tunnel, a new rail car, right? And then of course, operating it, right? And then maintaining it throughout its life cycle. And then you retire, you either dispose or you renew it, right? Or you replace it. It's they're all very similar. So I just gave you examples of how asset management is not just about physical assets. It's anything that has value in the organization is an asset, right? So you want to maximize the value of that asset. So if it's an employee, if it's a physical asset, if it's money, right? From the time that you get the money, you generate the revenue all the way until you book it in the very end, right? And you depreciate your assets. I mean, that's the financial process. Again, an end-to-end process that's life cycle based. And so that's where I stepped in to really look at every function. There were 14 functions in the organization that was being reorganized, and looking at it from a life cycle management approach, and then looking at how the touch points across those functions operated, right? Because there were aspects of each of those end-to-end processes that actually encompass much more than that department that owned the process. So it was really very exciting for me. I mean, it was a testing of ISO 55000 principles to see, do they work? And if you put them in place, what would it look like? It really was a very good foundational tool for me, an anchor, so to speak, because as you're looking across and putting in a lot of plans and trying to figure out what the strategies are, there's so much that you need to deal with in terms of issues and challenges that you need to be able to come back to always a framework, a set of standards, a set of principles that will guide you to the next.
That is so good to hear. And I think the fact that you came from the financial background, so many times we're hearing from people that it's the finance that really drives the transformation. If you do it this way, we'll give you your money. And then people start doing it that way.
Yes, but the language of finance is so different than the language of operations, right? So if you're looking at asset management here, asset management is like value, performance, right? That's what operations looks at. Finance is about monetary value, literally, right? How do you translate everything into dollars? Because the window to the organization is your financial plan. And how do you translate all the activities that's going on, right? And what you do as an organization into financial terms that shows how effective and efficient you are as an organization. The alignment of finance and operations, I think, is key. And asset management principles in ISO 55000 allows for that common language between two worlds that look at the world very differently. Yes.
Can you provide an example, perhaps, that illustrates this? Because you're making a really good point, and I think if you have an anecdote, it would really drive it home.
So I know that there is a financial asset register, right? We use that for financial reporting, but there's also an asset register from an operational perspective. That's where they log in all their work order activities, right? Their maintenance plans are in these systems. When you look typically at any organization, when you look at the two registers, they're night and day. I mean, you will see something called, I remember presenting on this, wherein I was at Bridges and Tunnels, and we were talking about the Henry Hudson Bridge, which is one of our bridges, and the toll collection system, right, which is an asset. So there is definitely a toll collection system sitting in the books on the finance side that we're depreciating. But then when you look in the operational register, I mean, it was broken down into a gazillion different components because that's how they were maintaining it. It's at the maintainable level of that toll collection system. So you never saw toll collection system on one side, right? And so you could never bridge the two. So anytime you would contract out to do anything, to spend, to invest in this asset, it was happening in a fragmented way, right? Because there's the operational side that will go through and maintain it, and then it just appears on the other side sort of as dollars, like lump sum dollars that they spent on all of their assets, and figuring out what aspect of that was related to the toll collection system, took time. Not that you couldn't do it, but took time to reconcile. So it's that type of thing. It's about asset information and the data, right? It's the same asset should have a common set of attributes that's used across the organization, whether you're on the finance side or whether you're on the operational side, or maintenance or any department, right, that needs to have access to that information. It's aligning those two worlds. That's the example that I can come up with.
That's a great one. That's a great one. And it seems like you had a third hat in that you were a digital asset management leader also.
Yes, because at the end of the day, asset management is people, process, technology, and data, right? When you manage your assets, you have to look at it across those four, I call them work streams. Digital transformation is the biggest thing that's going on now, and it's across the board. It's every industry. From an asset management perspective, we need better technology, to house the data and the asset information that we need to make better decisions, to help us prioritize our investments, for example, to help us understand the cost of all of our activities and whether it's being spent in the right areas or not, right? So I think that it is so important to look at digital transformation, but never also forgetting that there is a people component, capabilities. There is a data component. I'm working with the IAM specifically on one of their boards on digital hot topics, which is really defining what is digital transformation, because it is so broad. And when an organization decides to say, I'm gonna have a digital transformation, what does it really mean? For the MTA, it was about going paperless. Still pretty much manual processes are going on at our agencies. So much paper. We just want to get things into a paperless environment and then have an integrated systems environment to house all the data that we need to make better decisions. So if somebody asks what is the definition for the MTA, when I was there anyway, that's the definition we would give. But then you hear other organizations and digital transformation for them maybe focus on their leadership and their workforce, and making them capable, giving them the right training, right, in understanding systems life cycle, right? It could be any, you can approach it in many different ways, digital transformation. So for me, it was very exciting that part of one work stream of the asset management program is actually dedicated to digital technologies, remote condition monitoring sensors, right? And how you collect data, and how you harness that data to help inform all the planning for us, and of course the decisions on what investments to make. There's also the just system integration, putting in place an enterprise asset management system that actually marries your supply chain information with your financial ERP system, right? And your human resource systems, because the human resource systems really have information on all the employees who perform the jobs, and the work orders that are sitting in the asset management system. How do we put together a system architecture that allows for those interfaces to connect in the best way possible, without disrupting, obviously, the ebb and flow of the organization, because there is a reason why these organizations have departments that own pieces of data, right? Or specific systems for the data that's important to them. It's about connecting all of that data into one place and saying, all of us can use this data, because there's a lot that if we had a window into another perspective, Our
Yes.
decisions are that much more better, and that we're able to provide better service than to our customers. But in the end, it's all about providing that service to the customer. Every decision we're making is about that.
I love everything you're saying. This is great. We've got a couple questions that tie into finance. So
Oh God. Okay.
Cecilia Moat asks you to talk about finance looking at goodwill as a way of monetizing intangibles, or and how to translate asset management from an operational perspective into a finance model. I think you just talked about that. So
Yes.
talk about the goodwill.
So there are things when somebody talks about monetizing, you look at monetizing different things, intangibles, like as Cecilia is asking, goodwill, even data, how do you monetize that? How do you value that? And how far do you go in terms of valuing it? You can value it. Where does it appear? Does it really appear on your balance sheet as an asset with a value? Because that would be the ultimate goal, is to say, we want to value our data, and our data is costs this much, and this is the value in the organization. So that's a lot easier to do. Goodwill is something that I would say, this is now my perspective, is that it would appear when we do project justifications, right? Major renewals, capital improvements, and so forth, the social benefits, right, of an investment is often where we miss a lot of things, because the value of making an investment, you can put in how much it costs to maintain today, right? How much is the cost of the new asset versus the old asset, and so forth. But the social benefits, like how does it impact the communities that's going to be involved or serving, that the asset will be serving. You have to come up with a framework to identify what is that, and then quantify it. And I like to call it scenarios. So you would create, what is the scenario of goodwill for a specific investment, if we're looking at making an investment and saying, but there is goodwill associated with it, the value of goodwill that we're making this investment. Well, imagine the scenario of that goodwill, and what you will find is that scenario will have components that you can actually quantify and start putting together quote unquote price tags to different components. All of a sudden, now you have an idea. Yes, it's very scenario based, because you have to imagine what that scenario looks like in order to price it. But it is the one way that I know that I've done it when I was justifying capital improvements for bridges and tunnels for many, many years, is I looked at the societal benefits, and I would create a scenario of the value of goodwill, of the intent to make this investment.
You a thumbs up on that one. And then going back to the information about the systems, Steve Holland, who offered you the job, is asking about a parent-child relationship established from the system to each component. Was that part of the solution?
Yes. When you look at the enterprise system, right? First of all, the biggest challenge we had is to harmonize across different businesses, lines of businesses. We had 5 operating agencies with totally different types of assets, right? That we need to like categorize them, classify them in a way that would make sense organizationally. I apologize for the phone is
Oh, don't
ringing.
even worry about it. Just
Right.
talk right through it.
Okay. Yes. And so what we did is we held meetings with the different agencies, came up with what we call an asset classification to start breaking down. Okay, track. How do you break down the components of track? Right. So the parent is track, but then you'll have child. You have lots of children, right? Different subcomponents of that you would want to keep track of in your enterprise asset management system, because that is the level that you are maintaining it. You have to go to the maintainable level of an asset for it to make sense. And then you're able now to then roll it up to the track level and understand, how much you spend on that, or what is the manpower, what does it take to actually maintain the track asset class, not just for one agency, but across the different agencies that own track assets. So yes, so the answer is yes. That was probably a long, a long
Oh,
response.
that was the kind of detail, and I have to clarify that I was joking about the job offer. Just a desire to talk with you.
I would love
And
to have a conversation with Steve as well. I just saw that note in there.
yeah,
Absolutely happy to do that.
so I would now like to ask you your opinion about the Asset Leadership Network Advancing Equity with Asset Leadership Committee, and what you saw in that activity, and what you think might come from it, and how other the people who aren't the white males can learn from that, and increase our inclusion and advance diversity.
Yeah, and so I mean, I can hit that on multiple points in terms of equity and diversity. First of all, thank you for considering me to participate in that, because I found it really exciting. I looked at it and I said I never really once thought about it in any great level of detail, right? As I've been practicing asset management, equity of perspective, right? Equity of investments that are made, equity of the people who are performing asset management, right? Of women, so for me, I'm a woman, I'm a minority woman, right? It's like looking at it from that perspective. So, I thought that it was fascinating to actually have the opportunity to put a policy paper together that would look at that and what that would mean, because it does mean many different things, but we can define what those different aspects are of diversity and equity, and then align maybe frameworks that would allow people to incorporate that way of thinking into the overall asset management process. Because right now, I would say that for me, it's instinctive. Like when I was looking at investment, when I was doing investment planning, I mean, I was always looking at, what's in it for the customer and different types of customers. I mean, that's already about equity, right? But I wasn't thinking about it from the way we are now moving forward with this team, and looking at it really more formally and establishing policies around it. I think this is a wonderful opportunity, and it's also the right time to do it, because we need it. We need it. The world is changing, and I think you could see that we can no longer ignore issues of diversity and equity.
Yeah.
And while we may have been addressing it sort of indirectly or instinctively, it's time to make it more of a formal statement out there, and a more part of a formal process in terms of how we think.
One of
And
the things the committee pointed out was ISO 55001 4.3, 4.3, involve all relevant stakeholders.
relevant stakeholders.
Boom, that blows up. That's it.
That's it.
That's involving, a diverse and inclusive group of people. So if
Yes.
we get ISO 55,000 in legislation, then we'll won. We have won.
Oh my God, that would be fantastic. Yes. Yes.
Um, and I also want to ask about what's the view forward for you. What are you interested in doing? How can you take this great experience that you have, your leadership position, and what do you want to do with it?
Um, well, that's the reason why I, reached out to you guys, because I wanted to participate more in the activities and the committees that you are forming. And from time to time, I know you write papers and things like that. I would love to be part of that, just because it is definitely stimulating for me, and I do have a passion for asset management, and just taking that lens of ISO 55,000 and applying it to many different ways is something that I enjoy doing. My former job as head of transformation program delivery, I mean, I was always looking at things from a systems perspective. I mean, anything that was, somebody said do X, how does X impact Y, Z, STR, wherever what's out there. It's an automatic, what's the upstream effect, downstream effect, and if you had all different perspectives, what would they think? So that at least if you can get as many perspectives addressed as possible with whatever you are doing, I always believe it is a success, because then your buy-in is there and everybody feels that, you know, they have something in it, they're in the game. It's a win-win situation. So I love participating in things like that that would enable that to happen. So it's a kind of an idealistic view for me, but it's very possible. It's very possible working in the asset management world. Yeah, and of course the alignment of asset management traditionally, which is traditionally a technical, seen as a technical field, engineering, maintenance, operations, and aligning that with the support functions, so to speak, like HR and finance, and creating the common language that ties everything together for organizations. I think I'm really interested in that, because I have tried it, I have seen it, the development of the strategic roadmap for the transformation during the first phase that I was leading. I did just that, and I could see that it worked. It worked because it provided a framework for us to be able to articulate what it is that the MBA wants to do, in that RFP that we then solicited and you know started working with the contracting community. So yeah.
Hey, I just noticed we're getting to the end of our allotted time here, so I wanted to thank everyone for stopping by. Oh,
Before you do that, we are going into overtime, Mildred. You are not getting away. Got so much more to say. We're going to show the slides from the MTA and give you time to talk about it. You were on such a roll, I didn't want to interrupt you with the slides then, but we'll do that in overtime. So those of you who can stick around. All right, go ahead, Nick.
all right. And yeah, just wanted to say a quick thank you again to our patron sponsors, ABS Quality Evaluations and Onuma System. And of course, our organizational members and the Andrew James Advisory Group specifically. And then a quick plug for next Tuesday, as part of our Tuesday webinar series, the 2021 National Issues. We have the ALN Senior Fellows 2021 Path to Success. And again, that's Tuesday, next Tuesday, March 30th, 4 p.m. Eastern. And of course, you can see we have quite a list of ALN members, senior fellows, board members, and then some not. So that's what's happening next Tuesday, and we'd love for you guys to stop by. And with that, I'll pass it back to you guys, Mike and Mildred.
And as part of the ALN 2021 National Issues, Mildred will be joining us again on Tuesday, April 6th. So if you liked what she was saying today, she's going to be even more focused because we're going to be talking about the advancing equity in detail for an hour with Cecilia Mowat and a couple of other special guests. So Nick, can you share these slides for the MTA? And now, Mildred, you got a chance to talk to these two slides in detail.
Oh, okay. I would hit so that you could see all the all the animation. Yes, yes. So I mean, this slide is really a summary who the MTA is and the asset management journey for the MTA. We are 6 operating agencies, 5 operating agencies plus 1 capital construction and development arm for the capital program. So it's a very large organization. And you could see that we, with 24/7 operations, it's quite a challenging, duty that the MD has and an obligation for New Yorkers. I mean, the mission is to keep New York moving. We are very important in the New York metropolitan region. Our customers, even though in the COVID environment, like any transportation organization, we have suffered, loss of ridership and so forth, right? But very, very hopeful for the future and the return as we bounce back from the pandemic. I think the transportation system of New York has always been the lifeblood of New York City. So it's very difficult to imagine why it wouldn't survive, right? And I know that you know, some fantastic people really are there at the MTA. They're steering this organization very well through the pandemic. And I think, as always, the MTA comes out on the other side and is successful. So I'm very, very hopeful, and I also trust that they will be there in the future. The asset management journey has been quite a long one. You could see the mandate for asset management started in 2013. It was then Chairman Tom Prendergast that believed so strongly. He has a engineering safety background, right? And so he really saw asset management through the lens of operations and safety, and wanted it implemented across the board when he became chairman across every agency. So gap assessments were completed for each agency to understand the level of maturity. And I will tell you, as you know, always proud of my former agency, Bridges and Tunnels. We scored the highest in terms of maturity. We were right at the cusp of competence, like really just one step away from it, because we were already practicing asset management for the most part. And I know that because when I came to Bridges and Tunnels in 1992, I came from MDA headquarters, from the finance team there, and I was asked to implement the foundational elements of the financial operation, right, for Bridges and Tunnels and the capital program. So I put in place this whole life cycle management approach without even knowing about asset management and what that means. I as I'm looking back, I'm thinking, my God, I think I was already an asset manager before I knew what asset management was.
I'm sure you were.
Yeah, but you only know that in hindsight, right? You're able to evaluate your career and say, my God, those were the moments when I knew that I developed the first asset management plan, and we didn't call it an asset management plan. We called it the state of the system assessment. And what it was actually an inventory of our entire portfolio for bridges and tunnels, like all the different elements, and understanding the condition and the performance targets that we have to operate, right? So that we can provide better service and generate the revenue that PBTA is actually known for, is to provide the revenue stream for the MTA as a whole. So that was in 2007, 2008. Long before 2013, when as you can imagine. So we've had a lot of starts and stops, and when leadership changes, there's always a time of being sort of unmoored, right? Because then the new leaders come in and they try to get to know what the programs are, and it never fails. There is always an acceptance, right, that asset management is important. It is core to the organization. But obviously, with competing priorities, it may not necessarily always take top billing, right? So it is incumbent upon the people, the asset managers of the organization at every levels of the organization to continue this quest, this drive, right? To continue to put that in place. And that's sort of what has happened. I believe, we've had a major transformation mandate, and the focus has been on the transformation, then the financial crisis, and then now the pandemic. I mean, you can imagine that, when somebody says, oh, I have an asset management project, they're going to look at you and say, come on, what are you talking about? I mean, we got all these other, bigger problems, so to speak. So I think that it has been quite a journey. At my departure, asset management was transferred under the Chief Operating Officer, the Office of the COO, which we all believe it belongs at this point in time, because it is operational. It is primarily operational, but you do need the strategic perspective outside of the operational teams in order to bring that alignment, right? That line of sight that people talk about from between operations and the board level or the executive level. So it is, that's where I left it. I'm not sure I'm not sure, where they're at the moment. I've not really been able to, talk to people in the last month or so, but hopefully it's going well.
Well,
Go ahead.
just to let you know, we're getting feedback. Just to let you know, there's some trouble at the governor's mansion in New York, so that might affect things.
It definitely, yes. I mean, but that's, so let me just say this, right? The transformation mandate, when I was asked to step in and lead the planning efforts, I was told to focus on the transformation element of it, right? And we know that you're doing the asset management program enterprise level, but we can put that on pause. You can, and just let that wait a little bit. And I'm like, no, but they're one and the same, okay? Because you can really integrate it, and that's what I did. So that's why there is a slide here. I think my other slide.
Yeah, can we go to the next slide, Nick? There we go.
Yes, if you could just bring that all up. I mean, this is the famous slide from the transformation plan that is on the website of the MTA. And I remember building this. I remember building this with the consultancy that was hired and working with them and saying, we need to show visually, okay, that it is about the customer, right? And that our focus is to deliver these services. We use our assets to deliver services to our customers, which means we need to do something. We need to operate and maintain our assets and manage them throughout their life cycle so that they will be in tip-top condition, right? And be able to perform as best that they can. And now extending it to whether the asset is people assets, whether it's financial assets or physical assets or whatever other asset, data, whatever it is that you feel is important, right? That brings value to the organization, that is, needs to be managed from a life cycle management approach. So here is what you have. I mean, I had numbered sort of the major recommendations of the transformation plan. You can see it here. You have the agencies are going to be focused solely on safety operations and maintenance. Asset management is at the heart of that. You can imagine, right? Because that's what they're doing. They're providing services, they're using the assets, they're maintaining it, they're operating it. So that's asset management, no doubt. But then you have the second one, which is construction and development, and the consolidation of all the different agency capital functions into one central arm, right? Meant that you had the opportunity then to really have efficiencies, right, in managing your capital renewal programs and really integrating capital needs across the different businesses that we have. So this core and the goal here was to deliver capital projects better, cheaper, and that's something that they're able to do now with less, with less overhead, like less number of people that are performing the function. So when you go down engineering, and I'm going to point this out to you, that the engineering consolidation was meant to be to take a group of engineering minds and put them in the center so that they would be responsible for looking across and looking at innovation, making sure that all the latest and greatest asset improvements or new technologies to embed with our assets, how to make our infrastructure smart, all of those things would be under this central group of folks. But really behind that is asset management. It's an EAM, what I call it, an enterprise asset management team that was really looking at trend analysis, BIM, for example, managing the whole BIM network for the organization, right? Not just making siloed. It's those type of engineering technologies and making sure that there's a central place where it's being managed and that the data is also being managed and made available to all in order to make better decisions, right? And of course, I can go on. Customer-focused communications is about, again, the focus on the customer, but aligning all aspects of the business and having a centralized team to actually harmonize across the different organizations that we have. same with operating standards and service design, right? It's called like network planning and making sure that all of those plans are coordinated, between the different lines of businesses. So when
Well,
you
the
look
question,
at,
go ahead.
so the last piece here though is the strategic functions, the strategic business support functions, which is your HR and finance and so forth. And basically all of those align, here they're supposed to align if they approach everything from that life cycle management mindset. They are connecting at different points to all these different central functions, and they work together to serve these agencies, right, whose sole focus is service delivery, safe service delivery, and maintaining the assets. It was all kind of a story that we put together, and it worked. I mean, I think it's definitely it's a load it's a load full of a slide, but I think it communicates a lot about asset management, but organizationally as well, how asset management really supports an asset intensive organization to be world class.
So questions came pouring in. Someone from the Logistics Management Institute says, do you view logistics as a strategic support function?
I think the logistics function in the transformation is part of, we call it was procurement, but then they rebranded the procurement area to become supply chain management, which includes logistics. So it is a strategic support function, at least from the that plan that you just saw. There are many changes. Of course, I have left the MTA. I just want to caveat everything. I've left the MTA. I'm speaking from my experience there and what I left behind. And there could very well have been some changes to what these may look like now after I have left. So I just want to caveat all that.
You only left in January. We're not going to change it up
The change is fast and furious every single day. I saw one of my colleagues actually called in earlier, and I don't know if she's still in, Francia Henry. Hi, Francia, if you're still on. I saw her on the chat.
Yes.
So there's someone from MTA. That's
well,
great.
then one of our senior fellows from New York wants to know about the Long Island Railroad overtime payouts, and did those get discovered through asset management review?
I don't know. I don't know.
That's
Yeah.
quite all right.
Yes.
Then another senior fellow, Art Curlin, asks, did your inventory at the bridge and tunnels include personal property, computers, furniture, etc., or was it systems only?
And no, it was just structures and systems. The IT department had its own asset management system that kept track of all the computers and workstations and so forth. I think that's a gap if you ask me, because then that should also be part of the enterprise. If you're looking at enterprise, you should have that part of one system. But for right now, it is separate.
Okay. And you're getting compliments about your approach. And there was one question about the number of people related to each of the 6 functions. So there's more than 70,000 people. Did you ever have a breakdown of how many people were in each of the different?
And the largest of that would be construction and development. I don't have a breakdown of the number of people because remember, it was a consolidation, and then from there, there were some reductions, right? I mean, from attrition, obviously, most of the reductions came from attrition. Anyway, people were retiring. Just to say too that we are at a time we're in at the MTA. There is a generation that came, and we're now at the 20, 30, or 40-year mark for some of these people, and it's just a natural exodus that's happening because it's just retirement time for people who have been there, and time for also new generations to come. And I want to address that a little bit, that whole succession planning piece, which is something that the MTA is very serious at looking at in the transformation. One of the things that I did also as part of the asset management program, so they're intertwined, is an organizational digital twin that actually has a baseline of all the business processes by function, all the systems that support these functions, how the data flows across. It's a three-dimensional model. It's sitting in ARIS software. It's a baseline that we hope will continue to be used and maintained, because it houses the knowledge of people who have been there before, people who are getting ready to leave, as well as into the future. It's a great way to transfer knowledge and train your employees if you have this digital twin, digital twin, we're calling it, and we call it the business capabilities model. So that is one of the things that I'm very proud of leaving, having finished a baseline of that.
And you said that ARIS software?
ARIS software. That's the software that we use.
ARIS?
ARIS, yes.
Okay, just for everybody to know.
Yes.
And then if people will indulge me just one little bit more, there was a comment about, yes, people are assets also. But I think what you just said is more appropriate, and it's important to use the right language, because our country started with people being assets, and we don't want to use that language. But the way you said it, the knowledge of the people is captured, and the value is in the experience and intellectual property of the people.
Yes.
And we've got to try to figure out a set of words. Do you have any ideas on how to phrase that?
I have to think about that. That's nothing's coming to me at the moment, but yes.
Okay.
I've been very careful to talk about, as you said, people as assets without, elaborating on what that really means, not just as a direct asset or a value of a person, but how do you value your human capital?
Experience, yeah, and knowledge. And I don't even like human capital. That's
yes,
like,
I know that. Yeah, I know.
yeah. So usually I am sad when these talks end, but because you're going to be back in just a little, in 2 weeks, less than 2 weeks, I say I look forward to continuing this discussion, and maybe we'll have a better idea of how to address this very challenging issue. And
fantastic.
And thank you, congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Impressive. You started working when you were 6 years old. Wow.
Oh no, not 21. I was 21 years old when I came to the MTA, my first time.
It's great that you spent your whole career there, and
they were very good to me. Gave me every opportunity. I really say that sincerely, because not everybody is always happy, right? You hear people say they're not happy with their jobs and they leave, but for me, the MTA I always had support. I think that's key. When you have mentors and sponsors at the executive levels, you're able to do more, and you're inspired to do more. And that's what was afforded to me. So I really am very grateful. And what I have today is because of the MTA allowing me that opportunity.
Well, we thank you for your interest in the Asset Leadership Network and your ability to pass that on to other people through these types of events. Thank you very much. And thank you to all of you who attended today.